introduce tonight Dr. Melinda Docter. Yes, Docter is her name, and I've known her for several years now. My son goes to school here, so she's the director of this school, and it's been a wonderful match for my son, and she's enlightened me on this IEP process, which used to be very painful through LAUSD and really uncomfortable and give me like a week of anxiety before and sleepless nights and months of agitation after. And the process since this school and Melinda Docter has gotten involved has changed completely for my family. So I actually look forward to them. My son gets what he needs through the IEP, which is what it's intended for his education, and so you're in good hands tonight. This is really great information. Thank you.
Okay, so like Deborah said, my name is Melinda Docter. I'm the doctor here at Westmoreland Academy. And are you hearing feedback? No? Okay, a little bit. Okay. So just to tell you a little bit about the school, this is a non-public school. We have students ages 5 through 22, and all of our kids are funded through their local school districts. We contract with 20 different school districts here. We have 88 students, actually 90. Next Wednesday, 90. Yay for us. We've been trying to reach 90 for a long time. And a lot of staff. We have 90 students, and next Wednesday we probably have 70 one-to-ones. And for anybody out there that's listening or watching that's from a district, I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I say anything I'm not supposed to say. I'll find out later. Anyways, so we have a lot of staff on campus for our school here. Our little niche, our kids have really struggled with behavior and communication. But we have a variety of children here. I mean, we have children who are nonverbal and working on functional life skills and academics, and we have students that are highly verbal and working at grade level and are looking towards a high school diploma. And then we have students that are nonverbal and are have a lot more cognition than I think anybody ever knew they did, and they're just blossoming here. And then we have our 18 to 22-year-olds, our transition program. And so we have the whole range of kids here, and we love that. We love that because the kids learn from each other, the staff learn from the kids, the staff learn from each other. It's very much a team approach here. I am happy, believe it or not, to talk about an IEP for 2 hours because I think the process is really important. I mean, I'm not going to mislead you and say there are times where we're running around crazy going, oh my gosh, I forgot that IEP's in 2 days, and you're scrambling and all of that sort of thing. But my staff, and I can only speak for our school here, they're very well trained on the IEP process and how to write really good IEPs. That doesn't mean that things aren't revised or things aren't corrected, or I'll read an IEP and say, oh, the measurement of the school doesn't really make sense. Let's rewrite it. Those things happen all the time because there's a big learning curve. Because I can tell you that the kind of information that I'm going to give you tonight and how we write goals here at Westmoreland is not something that you learn in a credential program. Not to this depth. I mean, you do learn parts of it, but we really spend a lot of time training for IEPs here. Okay, so that's me. Now I want to find out who you are. I know some of you. But how many of you have children in non-public schools? Okay, a handful. And how many of you have children that are in the public school in special day class or resource or in some other capacity? Okay. And the rest of you aren't raising your hands? All right, you don't have to say. Okay. So I just want to kind of figure out, so the reason why I'm asking, it's a little different on our end. The IEPs are on our end. The parents usually have kind of fought the fight in a way. They're here because they went through all that. So it's a little bit different on our end. We really don't have adversarial IEPs. I mean, we might have a disagreement about something, or parents want something, and or think they need something for their child, and the assessor might disagree. We still have some of that going on, but we don't have those big adversarial meetings here because the kids are already here. So that makes it a little bit different. That's why I wanted to know, because I also, in my past life, worked for LAUSD for 13 years and I was a general education teacher for the first 13 years. And then when my son was diagnosed with autism, when he was 6, then my whole world became special ed, just as I'm sure yours did when your kids were diagnosed. And so I moved into USDs. I was an inclusion specialist and a private school consultant. And I did that for many years. And then I moved into research at UCLA, and then I was an administrator at other non-public schools. So that's kind of how I ended up coming here. I just want to give a shout out to my son, who is now 21 and graduated from UCLA in June.
Wow.
This coming June as a philosophy major and a music history minor, and he was informed me he's not going to graduation, and I said, you absolutely are going to graduation. I said, because, I didn't tell him, look at what it takes to get you here, but he's going to graduation. So we're very excited for him. Anyways, on to IEP. So, look, I have a whole presentation about the components of the IEPs, but you guys have all been on IEPs. So I need to know, I can go through all these slides and touch on them, but it's going to be a lot of information offhand, yeah.
Just don't forget people in transition programs, because we do have some people here.
Transition, like adult transition?
18 to 22.
Oh, okay, well, we have 18 to 22
So they're
year
still
olds
on
our
IEPs,
campus.
just to include those
Okay,
too.
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we have a transition program here on campus for 18 to 22 year olds. But I also want to make sure that you're not going to sit here and listen to 2 hours of something that you already know. So, I want to know what you want to know, what your concerns are, what you want to get out of this meeting, and then as I'm going through, I can tailor it, to the kinds of things that you want to learn about. But you don't have to share with me now. You can, yes?
Well, I'll be happy to share, because this was leading into what I just said. I work with a lot of families who need to write better transition goals at 16. So I would love it if you talk a little bit about the strategies, because what I see in IEPs are dreadful.
Okay.
And actually, most of the times they're non-existent.
Let me just take my...
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they're supposed to be in there from age 16, correct?
The transition IEPs depends on the district. For LAUSD, if the student is going to turn 14 before their next IEP, you must have a transition plan.
So
For students who are in districts other than LAUSD, they usually don't require until about 15 and a half.
all the more important, and the IEPs I read have no transition goals.
Okay. Okay, and remember, when I speak, I'm not criticizing any other school or any district or anything like that. I can just tell you what we do here, because it is a big deal to us. The IEP, it's not just an obligatory document that we fill out because it's something that has to happen once a year. We really look at the goals, and I review every IEP when I can. Sometimes I get bombarded with IEPs and then I just don't have a chance to review it beforehand. But if it's not the way it needs to be, we're not going to have the parents sign it. We're not going to encourage the parents to sign it because it needs to be the way it needs to be. Okay. So if you have any other concerns up front, and I'll write them in my notes in my section, otherwise we'll get it started. Yeah.
So I'm Melinda, Unified School District. My
Okay.
son's in 3rd grade, but I just need to know, the school that he attends is just really 1st through 3rd. He has to go to another school from 4th to 5th.
Okay.
Should we have a transition kind of plan for his IEP doing that?
You know what, it really depends on the needs of your particular child. None of our kids like change, so of course any new school and every new classroom setting, you really need to be very proactive. Even when we change kids here from class to class, it's a huge, big old production, let me tell you. It is like the kids have a visit, and then they share an activity, and then it could take us 3 weeks to transition a child from one classroom to another. It's a big deal. So you need to be proactive because the district, they may be really busy and they may not be able to do that for you, so you need to be really proactive about that. Go and look at the class first. The problem is, as far as like securities and things like that, your district personnel will probably take you to the other class. I don't know, and that's the side of it that I can't really tell you for sure how they work, because I'm just not on that side of it.
Well, I'll tell you what the plan is. I'm kind of foreseeing the future because I've already kind of asked you already foresee what school he may be possibly going to? And they're saying we probably know in April or May, so that's way too late.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way a lot of the districts are. And it's not because they don't want to give you the information ahead of time, it's because they truly don't have it. They don't know what their enrollment's going to be, they don't know where kids are going to go, and they don't know if certain classrooms are going to be open. I understand, but they also don't want to show you a class that potentially is closing in July.
Right, okay.
So I understand where they're coming from. I mean, really, believe it or not, the people that I work with, and we contract with 20 different school districts, all of them are really wonderful. They really, really are, and I'm not just saying that because I'm being recorded. They truly are wonderful. They know their stuff, they want to work, you know, and do what's best for the children. And those are the relationships really that I have with the districts. But once again, the relationship's a little bit different. Okay, any other? Okay, so we'll just go through. Okay, so I'm not going to read this to you, but take a look at this list. This is your IEP. This is really, really overwhelming. Do you see that I see my background that I chose? It's very serene, it's calm, it's blue, it doesn't have any primary color. Well, it has a primary color, but you know, not the bright blue. I did that just for you guys. I want you to have low anxiety. That's right. I mean, our IEP room here, it is like the most beautiful room on campus. You can't have any adversarial IEPs in there because they're so beautiful. So that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, you're there for what, 2 hours? And look at all the things that are included in IEP. It's really very overwhelming. And I think that when I was, well, I'm still a mom of a child with autism, but when I was that mom that, you know, that really I needed to really have control, I think in one of his IEPs I actually wrote the behavior support plan, which would not be allowed now, but at that point I did it. Okay, so I'm not going to read through that, but I just want you to see that these are all the things your IEP encompasses, and that's a lot of information and a lot of decisions to make. Okay, so let's go over timelines really quickly. And believe it or not, I actually had to look these up. Because I'm not the one that does the timelines, my office manager, Brenda, she manages all the timelines with assessments and all of that. So none of you are doing initial IEPs. All of your kids have IEPs, they've all been diagnosed. But initial IEP obviously has to be done in writing. Okay? Once the parent makes that initiation, okay, so even if once they make an initiation, the school has 15 days to either send home an assessment plan or come back to that parent and say, we don't think it's appropriate at this time. That could be for any IEP. And the reason they do that is because let's say your child just had a psychoeducational assessment and 2 months later you decide they should have another one. Okay, first of all, it invalidates the assessment. Second of all, you know, nothing's really going to change in 2 months. And so that it's not that the districts are trying to talk you out of doing it, it's that it's not really what's best for the child. I mean, unless something's dramatically changed, you're not going to see any sort of difference on a standardized assessment 2 months later. Yes, ma'am?
How should you do the independent assessment?
Okay, now are we talking about that right now, Diane? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So what Diane is saying is that, you know, you have obviously the right, and I'm just kidding with her. You have the right, let's say you have an assessment done, you don't agree with it, you can request of your district for an outside assessment. Okay, now that's not something that happens through us, that's something that you go through the district. We're just kind of mediators, but she's absolutely right, okay? So the parent has, when they're giving the assessment plan, the parent has 15 days to sign the assessment plan. Now, does that realistically happen? Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, we send home assessment plans and 30 days later we're calling the parent, if you want us to do the assessment, you need to sign the assessment plan. And it's just because people get busy. Okay, IEPs and assessments must be completed within 60 days. That includes calendar days, that includes weekends. The only thing it doesn't include is if there's a vacation that exceeds 5 or more, exceeds 5 days, then the clock will stop. So if you're on a 2-week holiday break, the clock's going to stop after 5 days. But otherwise, it's every day. Okay. If the request, let me see, if you want the reports ahead of time, you can request them. You don't want to request it 4 days before the IEP. If you want it before the IEP, request it 10 days before the IEP, submit something in writing saying, I want it 4 days prior, but it should be in writing. Okay? And then if you request an IEP that's not already scheduled an annual or a tri, the IEP must be held within 30 days. Okay, so just to go over some of those.
The request for a copy of the assessments, can it be done by email or does it have to be an official letter?
Oh, you know what, it really depends on the school. I mean, if someone sends me an email and says, hey Melinda, can I get the reports ahead of time? I'm not gonna go make them write a letter to me. So I'm a little bit more flexible with that, but I'm also, if they call me and say, can I get the reports ahead of time, I'm gonna say, send me an email. You know, I think it really just depends where you are. I mean, I could print that off and it's a request. So the assessment plan sent home, who checks the boxes? Well, that depends. Most of the time, the office manager or in the public school system, they usually have special ed clerks, will send home, and they're gonna check the boxes that correspond with the kind of IEP you're having. So if you're having a triennial IEP, they most likely will check a psychoeducational assessment. If you're not having a triennial and it's an annual IEP, they're not going to check that, and they're gonna check academic, and they're gonna check anything, any other service that your child already has. Now, if you've notified your team ahead of time, listen, the IEP is coming up, and I want an OT assessment, and it's either an initial, or it's, maybe you're trying to increase services, or something like that, then they would check that box. So normally everything's checked by the time you get it. Okay, and just so you know what's on there, health and development, vision and hearing, that's obvious. General ability, academic performance, that's going to be done by the classroom teacher. The school psychologist from LAUSD is not going to come here and do an academic assessment. Our teachers do those. Okay, language function, that's your speech and language. Motor abilities, that's gross motor abilities, and also fine motor abilities. Social emotional status. That's where you're going to get a psychologist to come in and do a social emotional assessment. We don't do those here on campus. Self-help, including orientation and mobility. Those are children with visual impairment to learn routes and cane use. That's what that is. And then career vocational abilities and interests, and that's a transition assessment. I'm not sure if the districts have additional ones they do. Whenever we have a transition IEP, whenever we have a child that's either over the age of 14 for LAUSD or over the age of 15 and a half, we always do transition assessments here. Now we pull from different ones because, trust me, there is not any one transition assessment that meets the needs for all of our kids. It just doesn't. And so we use the Brigance transition assessment, and I'm going to be ordering another one as well, so we can have multiple to choose from. Okay, so the first page is your demographics. I'm going to go through this real quick. It's the date of your initial meeting, the present meeting, the next 3 year, is it a transition IEP? And at the bottom of the LAUSD, first page of the IEP is all about foster care placement. If your child is still within the boundaries of LAUSD, if your child is in foster care placement, and so on. Okay, so this actually is really important. Goal acquisition. So this is where, you sit in your team meetings and they say, okay, they met last year's goal, they didn't meet this year's goal, they met last year's goal. It's all about goal acquisition, okay? So here's the thing. What you want to look for in IEPs is if your IEP, how many of you get progress notes quarterly? Everyone from Westmoreland, right? Okay, you should be. And with the LAUSD IEPs, there's only a little checkbox. Is the student on track to meet the grade, to meet the objective or the annual goal or not? And if not, why not? Needs more time, excessive absences, things like that. Now, on the other IEPs for the other districts, there's a place for you to write that out. Okay. We've been instructed by LAUSD to make sure that we're not just putting needs more time, making progress, because it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell attorneys anything. It doesn't tell really anybody anything. So you should look on your IEPs. If it's saying didn't make progress or the goal hasn't been met, you should ask why, and you should have that included in there. Okay? I'm constantly telling my staff, look, you guys have to remember that if our, this so-and-so parent comes and decides to take their child out of Westmoreland because they're moving across the country, whoever's across the country needs to be able to read this like it's a self-contained document and not wonder what these things mean or what's going on, right? Okay, So like I said, why? So did your child student meet the incremental objectives? How was the goal written? Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to write this or not, but so this is what I see quite a bit, and I catch it with my staff and then they redo it. So you might see something like a goal like, given gestures and modeling, Jonathan will initiate social interaction with a minimum of 2 of his peers 4 to 5 times per day for 10 consecutive days. Okay? And then let's say the annual goal is, well, independently. Okay? Then the objectives are, will with verbal prompts and modeling, and then ones with gestures, and then the annual is independent. So what happens is you'll sometimes have teachers that will say, let's say the student's not initiating any interaction. They'll automatically mark that goal as not met. But you have to be very careful because there's a very good possibility that child did meet some of the incremental objectives because of the prompting. So just because they didn't do it independently, sometimes people do it quickly and automatically, oh, not met, not met, not met. When you have to really read the goal, and if the goal is written correctly, you'll see that there might be different prompt levels or different measurements. And you have to be careful, not you, but like my teachers, they have to be careful. They have to look and see, did that child meet some of the incremental objectives? So that's something to watch out for. Okay, language classification. This section is completed, although LAUSD's, the paperwork just changed, so it's not quite as complicated. These are for kids that are English language learners. So if your child is an English only student, designated as English only, this is not going to be filled out, or it might say English only on it. So this is where the language classification, we give an ELD level, which there's a little like rubrics that tells you the student can understand this, this, and this. There are 2, this, and this, there are 3. So we go ahead and do that. The communication observation matrix is actually like this rubrics where you can look and see, and it's usually used for kids that are nonverbal. The problem that we've come to find is that we get kids that have not been redesignated or not been identified as a student that we can use the communication matrix with. So now we're having to sit down and do an actual assessment with a student who is nonverbal, who has English as a second language. So we're trying to actually kind of find a way to get all of these kids that got to that exam, that assessment is not beneficial for them at all, to get them kind of redesignated so we can use the communication matrix. Redesignation is usually the term used when students kind of phase out of the English language development program and they're now redesignated to like English only.